Welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Lynn Berger, host of Lynn Berger Interviews Remarkable People. And today you're in for a treat, literally and figuratively. I have Joey Batista, founder, owner of Joey Bat's Cafe and Gama Lounge. Joey, thank you so much for being here. I've had the privilege of meeting you on another show talking about your career and how you got to where you are today. So let's start from the beginning. Did you know what you wanted to do when you were younger, and where originally are you from?
So I'm originally from a small town in Western Massachusetts called Ludlow. It's made up mostly of Portuguese and Polish immigrants. And back then, I mean, I grew up with my parents got divorced at 15, so I grew up with my grandparents. So there was a heavy connection to the Portuguese background. Back then, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My uncles worked in construction. I worked with them. I worked at a couple banks. I worked at a restaurant. I worked at Adventureland, kind of just playing, monitoring kids. There's a bunch of different things. At an electronics store. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. The whole entrepreneur thing is not, and what's funny is that a lot of family members on my mother's side of the family are entrepreneurs. Like my father has the store, my uncles have their construction companies, my aunt is a lawyer. So is that interesting how I guess I was around it and I didn't really notice it. I like to say that I was just around a lot of hardworking people.
Well, it shows. It shows. So take us back a bit. When you started your career and lead us through till this moment in time.
So if we go back to kind of the moment I decided to, because I remember I went to school, I tried community college right after high school because I thought it was something you're supposed to do, not knowing really what I wanted to do. I tried and failed, had to pay that financial aid back, which was a good lesson learned. And then I went and started working for my uncle full time. And I had that moment where we were working construction. I was paving sidewalks in Connecticut. And I know you've heard this story before, but it is. And it's a moment in my life that I remember very vividly of like standing there and being like, oh my God, is this what I'm going to do? And I know that if I'd stayed doing that, I probably would have started my own construction company or would have taken over or helped with my uncles. But I just felt like there were other things that I was interested in, like I had always been very hands-on, very tech savvy, and I could learn things really fast. So I just decided, I'm just going to try the school thing again. The difference being, now I had the understanding of what it's like to have a real job, and because the real world just kind of hits you like, okay, that's it. I'm not a student anymore. This is life. I'm just going to work every day now until whenever, right? And I remember going back and being, it's so different. I just sitting there and like really enjoying listening to the professor, grab a coffee, put up my feet. It wasn't like I was forced to be there. Now I wanted to be there. So that's when the straight A's came. And I did that for a few years. I eventually found a really good, I got an internship at probably one of the largest companies in Western Mass. And it was a corporate job. So I went from working all these different, I don't know what kind of jobs you'd call those, but really like entry-level type work into the corporate world, but it was entry-level corporate world. And that was so, black and white to me, like the way that they spoke and everything. So it was really interesting, but I just learned really fast. I did that for about 9 years in the tech world in Massachusetts. Then I moved to New York in 2013. And when I got to New York, I had the same job. So it was an easy transition. I just moved to the New York office. And then here, I was just exposed to so much opportunity. And I remember switching to so I was an engineering role. I switched to a sales engineer, which is great because being a social person, you're now helping other finance companies or different, you're basically accompanying other business partners in the thing that I'm an expert in. So, hey, I've done this already at a Fortune 100 company. Let's go to JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs or whatever it is and help them with the same thing that I was already doing back. So it was really fun meeting different customers, traveling, the expense car. I was always eating steak dinners. It was so good. Let's be honest about it. The company card made it so much easier to enjoy that. But it got to a point, I remember I worked 3 more years and then I got hired by a startup out of Portugal, which is a really cool, I'd never worked for a startup before. The technology was amazing. But just before that, I had kind of played with I was just like, what could I do in New York because I don't know, you see all this opportunity, but I was starting to get bored. And then I'd be inspired by like my friend Poon, who's a DJ, but he's also making and designing hats and shirts. And I'm like, damn, everybody I know has multiple hustles, multiple side hustles. And I'm like, I know a lot of things. I'm very handy. I can figure stuff out. So I was like, what could I offer in New York? And I could have opened like a small tech company. And I was like, nah, man, there's a billion of those here. It's like, well, there's no Portuguese food. So I called my mom, and one of her cakes is really popular back home. It's called bolo de bolacha. And I don't know how to cook anything, but this is a no-bake cake. So she showed me how to make it. And I started making it out of my apartment and selling it to a few restaurants, and then eventually a bodega. And so it started to pick up. So around the time that I joined this startup, I was also selling the pastries now, because I had switched to, I told my mom, I was like, let's try doing the pastries instead. And I found myself there while working, but also thinking like, oh, how can I sell more pastries? What could I do? What kind of strategies could I take? And it started, my first one was Hester Street Fair. And I did the Hester Street Fair, learned a lot in those first 2 or 3 times. And then I started doing other fairs. And if we're going to fast forward to the day that I decided to do full time with this, was Day of Portugal, Mineola, Long Island, June 10th, I believe, of 2017. Or at this point, I had already been starting to sell pretty well at fairs around the city, which was a target. Like, how can I get Americans to buy this product that they don't really know about? It's still early days, not as many people going to Portugal from the US, or with such frequency and popularity. So then I get to this Portuguese festival, and I was like, all right, this is going to be the real test. Now we're selling to Portuguese. It'd be like if you have a cannoli and you're going to go to a Italian festival, they're going to scrutinize this thing, you know?
Mhm.
And I remember like 9 in the morning, we're all set up, and this older gentleman comes up and he's kind of inspecting, and he's like, oh, in Portuguese, talking to me. It's like, oh, pastéis de nata, I buy these at the bakery. And I was like, no, these are much better. Try it.
They are.
And he had one, and I didn't expect him to be like, whoa, but he was like, actually, and he's telling me this important, actually, this is pretty good. And like, give me a dozen. And then when I knew that's when I had him with a dozen, and all kinds of things that were done differently that day. Like I was pushing them frozen, whereas we don't buy them usually frozen. But I know as an American that we love to buy things in bulk. So if you can offer somebody a good quality product that they can buy in bulk and keep it home and serve the same way, you're good. So I was pushing that, and that day I sold 3,000 of them in one day. So then it was kind of like, all right, I need to just do this. And so I started just signing up for every fair I could think of, all over the city, Upper West Side, Upper East Side, on the street, sometimes in a park. I mean, I left the corporate world of 13 years, and I was like, oh, I got this. Just do as many of these fairs as I can. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but who cares? I'm making money. It's fine. There's some real good lessons I learned during that time. Like if I could go back, I wouldn't have left so soon. I would have saved up more money and then left.
Mhm.
You don't know that at that time. You're just feeling like, just do fairs. If I do fairs, it'd be 10, 20 grand a week. This would be great. Doesn't work that way.
Well, but it has worked for you.
It has.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about how your business grew, because it's, everyone knows about it, and how
Yeah.
you started your stores. And let's start with what worked.
Right. I mean, the key to, or at least one of my favorite things to mention to people is, it's very cliche to say like, oh, being an entrepreneur is you got to work hard. There's a lot of people I know all around me that work hard and they still do the same thing forever, and they don't really get to what they really want to do. It's that believe in yourself and what you're trying to do, and that persistence, and being like, because there's a lot of times it's so amazing. And like I get cliche when you'll have like a lull and you'll start doubting yourself, like, oh my God, am I doing something right? And then all of a sudden it'll jump up again and be like, oh yeah, this is no problem. And it like, you really have to train yourself to like, yo, chill, look at it over the long haul, not just, So I like to remind myself of my old sales boss. He used to say, you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it sucks, but you cannot take the next step up. Like if you said right now, Joe, I'm going to open 4 cafes. That's not a challenge. It's cookie cutter for me. I know what it takes and what it costs for me to open a cafe. I know the recipe to make it work and sell where I can sell my natas, right? But it's like, for me, the next time of uncomfort is going to be basically now opening the bar, which is a huge 5,000 square feet space. That's made me uncomfortable for a good year and a half, and I'm still not open yet, but That's another story. And I feel like next after this, it's going to be like franchising, or I decide to buy a building. That's going to be another uncomfortable time. But we have to understand, as an entrepreneur, you should never truly be comfortable. You should not just walk away, and you got to always be thinking, what's next? But I'm going on a tangent because I can talk to you about all this stuff.
Well, I got to tell you, the personality fit is fantastic. You had a good product, you took the risk, and the enthusiasm and excitement is contagious.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's real. I hear it.
A lot of people think it's really cool that I'm able to work for myself and promote my culture.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to think of it as, it was convenient because I found a differentiator, like a lot of businesses try in the market. Like, nobody's doing this. So it's almost like my obligation to do this. Joey, you need to put your effort into doing this because no one else is doing it. I think having the work ethic, the confidence, as I'm very obviously a confident person,
right?
Together makes it. What else should I have been doing? This is literally fun for me. The only thing holding back is finance. Like, dude, I want to do that. A lot of times I'll tell people, want to let me borrow money? Let me borrow money. I'll put it to work. I'll figure something out.
Well, you seem to have figured it out, and they're delicious.
Thank you.
I did taste them in Lisbon, and I actually think they're better downtown on Allen Street.
We don't like to. I like to tell everyone, listen, we're not trying to compare.
Okay.
I just want to be a good representation of that product here in the US.
They're very good, and including the packaging.
Thank
and you had a challenge, and we've all had a challenge, and hopefully we're coming a little bit out of this challenge. Tell us how you coped with COVID. What happened?
So right before COVID, I was at my peak in terms of sales and the direction I was going at. Allen Street was doing great. I had a pop-up at 47 in Lexington in a hotel, the Roger Smith, which was doing great. That was really a test of Midtown to see if it would justify me taking another risk. Right. And it proved it. So then on 46th and Little Brazil, 46th, between 5th and 6th, I jumped on this perfect little place that was already built. I just was gonna repaint it, and we were gonna. It's a target audience with the Brazilian community there. They know my product. We were gonna murder it there. And I signed that lease. I had borrowed money to sign that lease too. A part of it, I put some money up myself. I was also selling in Rockefeller. Oh my God, we're killing it on the sidewalk in Rockefeller. It was absurd numbers we're doing there. And I signed that lease. And then a week or two later, the shutdown happened. So at this point, I had not really had official employees, because before that, it was either me or my mom sitting in the cafe, right? And then sometimes my sister would help and whatnot. But this was going to be like, I was growing really fast. And I think I was already selling 20 or 30,000 tarts a week at that point. Wow. With like hardly any, I had no. Allen Street was the only physical shop. In the Roger Smith, they just gave me a corner. I was in the corner on a couple of tables. So I was really feeling like, I'm already thinking, man, I should try and buy the building on Allen Street, right? Secure my first ever cafe. And COVID happened. And I was like calculating, I'm not a finance guy, but I'm like, shit, like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen now? Because I can't be open in Midtown in either of those two places. So I went back to Allen Street, and it was like reversing the clock 6 months prior. So I was sitting in that cafe, and New York felt like an apocalypse, straight up The Walking Dead. Nobody was on the street. And I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? So a lot of people just closed up, but I was like, I had nothing else to do. So I might as well just sit here. But, you're sitting there and you're just constantly, like I am today. I'm never not thinking about what I could be doing. So I have this big bay window. I don't know if I remember you've probably seen it. So that used to be just a place with seats. And I said, why don't we turn this into a serving counter so the customers don't go inside, and we'll turn it into a bar too, because now to go cocktails, I had a beer and wine license, but I had never really used it because my focus was always on the natas. So I created this little thing at the window. And then what I did was I would just call friends and be like, hey man, come hang out on the sidewalk and have a drink with me. And we would do that. And it was warm. It was still warm. So people, I think in the window started seeing us outside because everything was closed. And they just started coming down. And I have photos to show of us. It's like all spread out on the sidewalk, having a coffee or whatever. And I could legally be open till 12. I could serve till 12. And it's weird to think back to nights where I was just serving bartending in my window till midnight, and we'd have 6, 7 people on the sidewalk drinking. And it just went like that for a while. And it did really well. And then little by little, I decided to start blocking off the parking spots. And I have photos of all this. It's great. I got my friend, construction buddy, who would coming by. He gave me construction barriers. We locked them all up. Then I had the FDNY come by and fill them all up. And then I had my friend painted them. Then I put chairs and stools outside to give a little space for my customers to sit at. And around this time, bars were places were allowed to open, but you couldn't be inside. You could just go. Now, if you have a bar that really doesn't offer any kind of unique experience, why is anyone going to go buy that drink there? But at my place, we had people outside. We were hanging outside. It was fun. It was cool. There was more value in me being outside, just chit-chatting with my customers, or liaising is what I like to say, or rather than me being in the window, right? Because then people want to talk to you, but they're also blocking the line. So I remembered friends who worked at bars that I used to go to. I started calling them up. None of them were working. And I gave 2 or 3 of them a job there. And man, they were just killing it. Now I was just doing is sitting outside talking to customers. I mean, there were days when the sun was out, I'd be laying out tanning on the street. We're tanning on the street. So it was wild. And then it got to then you're always thinking ahead. And at that point, I think we were going to be allowed to be inside, but spaced out. And I was like, why are people going to be outside of my place now when they could be inside somewhere else? So I had the heaters. They were really strong. And then I put up the big, thick curtains, which you probably saw too. A friend of mine who was doing comedy out in Brooklyn, Yumi is her name. And I said, hey, let's try doing a show on Allen Street. So we tried it. And I remember that first show, every comedian asked for their own show. And that was like, all right, what do I got to lose? We just want something going on out here. So it got, in like a week or two, we had 6 nights of comedy, 3 shows every night from Monday to Saturday. The only reason we didn't do it Sunday is because we had a lot of success with the Brazilian, the Brazilian band, the forró music, which was also, I mean, that's a whole nother, we were dancing out under that inside the it was so amazing. When I look at videos, like stories, they get reminded, like, wow, that was a crazy time. So during this time, all this was going on. The comedians nowhere else to perform. They were performing in like the park in the freezing cold. But we had all the big hitters. We had Mark Norman. We had Sam Morrill come through there. We had all these big guys, really, really popular ones now. They just popped in here and there because they had nowhere else to perform at that time. And that's how the Joey Bats Comedy Club thing started, because I said, why should I stop this momentum? Doesn't make any sense. So I'm just kind of rolling with it, you know, Lynn. I'm not really like an expert in any of this, but I'm resourceful. So I was just kind of trying to think of different ways to keep things fun. And then we've had all kinds of different events. So we had an album release party. We had a few birthday parties when no one else really had an option. And I think my place got a lot more popular because of COVID, because people were walking to like, what is going on over here? It's so great. And, you know, it's funny. Now the business there has died down. And it's fine. I expected it. I'm not surprised about it, but I'm now taking other risks, right? We opened the Chelsea Market now. It was amazing. They invited me to open there. So, and I visited another place today, maybe Grand Central Station. I don't know. So, you know, you can never be still truly, and it's not work. Like I said, it's just fun for me. It's not work. The only thing that holds me back is finances. That's it. Otherwise, that'd be just, let me tear it.
Well, what's next? So you said you have some ideas. What would you love to do? What?
So it's important to set goals, right? And my ultimate goal is to have Pastéis Nata being accessible all over this country. Okay. So we technically have that already because let me rewind a little bit. During COVID, I pushed more the online business. I created the site. I added the ability to buy and order on that, and online business, you know, it helped a lot. It helped me get through a lot of the bills I had then. I was fulfilling those orders in the space right next to my cafe on Allen Street. Small space, basically storage. And it was great. And then towards the end of COVID, I actually had called, because they had called me back in like 2017 Goldbelly. which is a company based here in New York
Mhm.
that allows for local popular brands to be available nationwide.
Mhm.
So I reached out to them again because I totally forgot about them. I wasn't ready the first time. And I said, hey, you know what? Let's try this. I'm already established. I'm already shipping. But you guys, I think, they had a lot of value in terms of marketing. They do a lot of marketing on your behalf. So they helped me perfect my fulfillment process. All my orders go next day now. So that whole business was doing so well. It was crazy, Lynn. I remember December of 2021. I was still packing them all myself. There were 4 or 5 days in a row when I have to pack 150 orders per day. Each order is 24 natas, and they were going everywhere, all the way to Hawaii. So that was great. But I kept telling myself, all right, you need to not be packing these. This should just work without you. So in January of last year, I found a place here on Houston Street, very close by, that does all my online order fulfillment. I have a few employees there. I don't even have to be there. Amazing. Boom, box
Right.
check. A lot of the way that I like to operate is the same way I did in the technology world, right? I had an assignment, or I created an assignment, a project. Let's say I was bringing new technology into the company. I would research it, put it together, development, pre-production, production. And once I set it up and it's working, I don't want to touch it again. I want something new. I don't want it. It's the same thing now. If I get called back to like a basic procedure thing in the cafe, it's really frustrating for me. I'm like, I can't worry about this little thing. I need to walk away from that. And that's probably an issue that a lot of entrepreneurs face, for sure. So
They like the beginning,
exactly
the
the
excitement.
exciting, but there's people for both. There's people who like structure and they want to do the same thing every day,
Right.
and that's perfectly fine. I'm not that person. So I built that, did it, the online business. I'm never there. And after that was Gama, was the crazy that I'm still dealing with. I was just like, all right, look, I don't know if I should open another cafe yet. This is summer of 2021. I don't know what things are. Midtown is still dead. Does it make any sense? Where am I going to go? And I said, but people are still drinking. So I started looking at bar spaces, and I came across this space, and it's huge and it's amazing. And I can't wait for it to fully be open, because the first floor will be an evolved version of the Joey Bats with full liquor, more pastry options, more food, cocktails made with different Portuguese liquors, things like that. It's going to be a soccer sports bar. This space will be the actual passion project for me, meaning it's a place that I've always wanted to own and hang out at, right? Still a work in process, a year and a half later. But I'm not going to give up on it. I mean, the name is literally right behind me here.
I can see that. You don't give up.
No. But while I'm doing this, I'm thinking of other things. So we do the street fairs, the Portuguese festivals. And amazingly enough, I got offered to invited to open at Chelsea Market. So we did that. So that's done. Now my objective for this year is to open at least 2 more locations, because my natas are made in Portugal, kind of really streamline the logistics, because I still do a lot of this myself. And I hate documents and documentation. I don't want to worry about schedules and things like that. I'm the guy you just like send them out, find opportunity. I'm that guy, right? That's when I'm happy. It's not work for me. So I need to like figure this out so that like we always have a rotating container coming in. We're never like we ran out of product a month ago, and now I have a container on the way. I can't have it. But then to have that, you got to have the finances right, lines of credit, all these things I want to really get going. And then to figure out my logistics in terms of, all right, now you got 6 locations. How do you keep them stocked? Right now I do that. So I need to pass all that off. And then I feel like I need to build a business in a box, essentially. Think like Cinnabon, Auntie Anne's, Mrs. Fields. And, if I can build it in that box where it's like you go to someone like, here's a product that doesn't exist in the US outside of Portuguese communities. If you want to sell it in Kentucky, you want to sell it in Chicago, I think it's going to be perfect at malls. I think it's going to be perfect at big cities like it is in New York, and at food halls. I think it would be perfect.
Fantastic.
Right. So building it so that everything's taken care of. You're putting in this amount of money, and then Joey makes sure you have the branded cups, the plates, the everything you need. And I think I've never done this before. I'm just, know?
All right, well,
So,
in a couple of years, I have a feeling, a few years, this will be done. Well, I can't thank you enough. Your enthusiasm and the fact that you used every experience you had, the construction, the technology, it all came together. And it's very encouraging for people to hear that, because when they hear that you really did that in such a good way, it makes them feel whatever they're doing will come back and be very worthwhile. So thank you so much.
my pleasure. My pleasure. Wait, we have, I get a lot of prospective food entrepreneurs that'll hit me up on Instagram or email me, or they'll come to me and they'll just kind of want to, like, you know, hey, I got this really good concept. And it's interesting to hear people, they always want everything to be perfect, but none of it really is going to ever be perfect, especially unless you're just already rich. If you already just have a ton of money to start with, and there's so many steps that I would have skipped, but then I would have never learned those lessons, right? Now I'm never going to be the guy in the room that doesn't know how I got from here to there. Oh man, I suffered through all of this. I didn't just jump over this and go there. So the entrepreneur that just invests in a business is not the same as me, is that kind of entrepreneur, the person that starts literally from the ground up and always suffering through it. So people tend to want to, like, when they want to start something, they're like, oh, I really need this and I got this. I'm like, dude, get yourself a logo, a banner, and start selling the food at the street fairs. It costs you $100 to be there, and then you see if people actually like your product. Start off like that. Keep your full-time job, no risk, a little more work, but do you really want it? Because if you don't really want it, then you're wasting my time. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Progress is progress, whether it's slow or fast. It is still progress, right? I mean,
fantastic. Another career, motivational. Well, I just tell everyone how to get in touch with you and where to find you.
Well, I manage all my Instagram accounts. It's probably one of the easiest ways, whether it's Joey Bats Cafe, Joey Bats NYC, Gama Lounge, or Joey Bats Comedy. You can message me there, or you can email me at joey@joeybatscafe.com. Probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
It was so much fun. Great to once again be in touch, and we'll be in touch again shortly. Thanks again, Joey.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. Bye.